Hi there. Welcome to this episode of Lights Out, your virtual campfire. I'm your hostess with the mostest ghosties, Sylvia Shults. Contrary to what you might think, the state of Illinois isn't all soybean fields and corn silos. There's some really pretty country if you know where to look. One of the loveliest bits of Illinois is Starved Rock State Park, about 90 miles south and west of Chicago. Here you'll find green, shady trails that meander next to splashing creeks, trails that lead to stunning rocky canyons. You'll find nature lovers of all ages out enjoying this oasis of natural beauty. You'll also find ghosts. The spirits of Starved Rock are varied. Come with me and we'll meet a few of them, if you dare. Lace up your hiking boots, slap on a glob of sunscreen, and let's go lights out. Starved Rock State Park, which became a state park in 1911, is one of the most beautiful nature spots in Illinois. 18 canyons, their sheer sandstone walls festooned with draperies of living green, dot the park. Several of these canyons, notably French, Wildcat, and St. Louis canyons, have waterfalls that cascade over the rock ledges in the spring and after heavy rainfall. In the winter months, bald eagles flock to the park from Canada and the Great Lakes states in search of food. The lock and dam system at the park keeps the moving water from freezing, so the eagles can find fish in the river. The area of Starved Rock has been the site of human habitation going back 10,000 years. It was home to many Native American tribes, including the Illinois, Miami, Peoria, Ottawa, Shawnee, and others. In 1673, members of the Marquette and Joliet expedition were the first Europeans to see this gorgeous landscape. Fort de Chartres was built between 1719 and 1721, and in 1731, Illinois became a French province, governed directly by the French monarchy. The territory was ceded to the English in 1763. Starved Rock got its name around 1769. This was when Pontiac, a chief of the Ottawa, was killed by a brave of the Peoria tribe. In retaliation, the Ottawa and the Potawatomi, who were allies of Pontiac, attacked the Kaskaskia tribe of the Illiniwek and drove them to the top of Starved Rock. Trapped on the butte, those who didn't starve were massacred. This is not the only dark history to be found at Starved Rock. Violence returned to the state park in March 1960. Mildred Lindquist, Frances Murphy, and Lillian Etting, three friends from the Chicago suburb of Riverside, came down to Starved Rock for a 4-day weekend of hiking, bird-watching, and relaxing in the great outdoors. They never got to enjoy that vacation. The three women dropped off their bags in their rooms, had lunch in the dining room, then went out for the day. As they left, carrying a camera and a pair of binoculars, one of them called out in passing to a staff member of the hotel that it was a beautiful day for a hike. The three hiked to St. Louis Canyon and took pictures of the majestic waterfall at the end of the trek. Unfortunately, that's where their idyllic girls' vacay ended. A few days later, after a late winter snowstorm, several boys from the Illinois Youth Commission forestry camp found the mutilated bodies of the three women under a ledge in St. Louis Canyon. They had never even made it out of the canyon. The women had been bludgeoned to death. A frozen tree limb covered in streaks of blood was found nearby, and investigators realized they'd found the murder weapon. Two of the women's bodies were tied together with sturdy white twine. State's Attorney Harland Warren did everything he could to solve the heinous crime, but it was slow going. There were very few clues to work with, And Warren was at odds with the state police, who wanted jurisdiction in the case, as the murders were committed in a state park. And the county officials had no experience in dealing with such a horrific crime. Finally, Warren caught a break. In September 1960, 6 months after the murders, Warren realized that the twine used to bind the bodies had come from the kitchen at Starved Rock Lodge. Meeting with the kitchen manager, Warren found both kinds of twine in the kitchen within minutes of starting his search. All of the lodge employees had been given lie detector tests, and they had all passed. But Warren gave the tests again. This time, a dishwasher named Chester Otto Wager was fingered as a suspect. Oddly enough, Wager happily cooperated with Warren in his investigation. He even turned over a piece of his buckskin jacket so that some suspicious dark stains could be tested. Stains that turned out to be human blood. Although in 1960 there was no way to match the bloodstains to any of the 3 victims. Warren gave Wager a series of lie detector tests. Wager failed all of them. On March 4, 1961, almost exactly a year after the murders, Chester Wager was found guilty, and on his 22nd birthday, he was sentenced to life in prison. The tragic murders of the 3 women have left their mark on both the landscape and on Starved Rock Lodge. Guests at the lodge have reported seeing shadow figures, experienced cold spots, and have seen doors opening and closing on their own. And outside, in the canyon, hikers have heard disembodied voices coming from the rock formations. 2 friends of mine, Kelly Meyer and David Youngquist, went for a hike in Starved Rock State Park, with some very interesting results. David and Kelly are both sensitive to spirit energy. Several days after their visit, Kelly told me, the murdered women came to her to tell their stories. Kelly was sympathetic to the wandering spirits, but she was a bit peeved that they chose to appear to her while she was enjoying a nice hot soak in her bathtub. David's experience with one of the Starved Rock spirits was even more intriguing. When Kelly and David got to the end of their hike and were getting ready to leave, they, of course, told the spirits that they had to stay in their home, and investigators do this to prevent spirits from following them home and making nuisances of themselves. But one spirit chose to interpret David's request a little more loosely. Botreau was a French trapper, a voyageur, who went native and married an Indian girl. He was accepted into the Potawatomi tribe and lived with them until his death. He lived sometime during the French occupation of Illinois, so about mid-1700s. When David and Kelly asked the spirits to stay in their homes, Botreau apparently decided to follow David's request, but not in the way David meant it. Botreau had been a wanderer in life, a trapper and trader roaming over miles of north-central Illinois wilderness. His territory included what later became Princeton, which is where David and his family lived at the time. So Botreau cheekily gave himself permission to visit David, reasoning that since that part of the state was also his stomping grounds, he was still staying in his home. He only made an exception to this when David traveled to the Quad Cities. Botreau was fine visiting with David in Princeton because that was within his tribe's territory. Farther west, though, was the territory of the Illini, who were the enemies of the Potawatomi. So Botreau stayed out of that area. Botreau is a very powerful spirit. After his death, he became a psychopomp, or a spirit who leads other souls into the afterlife and makes sure they get there safely and settle in with relative ease. He's a bit rough around the edges. After all, he was a backwoodsman in life, and he does love the ladies. David introduced me to Botreau several years ago, and Botreau is quite the charmer. We were introduced one night after I had helped David's group do an investigation at an antique store in Ottawa. We stood outside on the sidewalk next to my car, and David told me that Botreau was standing just to my right. I had worn dangly earrings on purpose so that if Botreau wanted to touch them or play with them, I'd feel it. I didn't feel a tug on my earlobe, but I did see a bit of sparkle in the air to my right, a little shorter than the height of a man. David assured me that this was Botreau. According to David, who can actually speak with Botreau, the grizzled voyageur came to visit me several times after that. Hey, he's a spirit. He can go wherever he wants. He had taken a shine to me, and he apparently made several visits to my home. Of course, I was completely oblivious to his presence. Over the years, Botreau's visits became fewer. David moved across the country, and he and Botreau no longer communicated. So I figured that Botreau had forgotten about me. But I was wrong. I visited Starved Rock State Park with Chicago Hauntings on a tour led by Ursula Bielski. Part of the day's events included a hike down to St. Louis Canyon, where the bodies of the 3 murdered women had been discovered. I love hiking through woods, so this was a real treat for me. The trails were fairly humming with hikers going back and forth. Most people, I'm sure, had no idea that they were walking in haunted woods. They were just out enjoying the beautiful sunny summer day. There was even someone getting married in St. Louis Canyon. The paths in the canyon were strewn with dusty red rose petals. In the canyon, we decided to use dowsing rods for a little Q&A with any spirits that might happen to be hanging around. We didn't have a whole lot of action with the rods at first. Then I remembered that this area was Botreau's home in life. I asked Ursula if I could use the rods. It was the first time I'd actually held the rods for myself. I'd seen them used, but I'd never done it. I took the rods and held them loosely in my fists, keeping my thumbs away from the bend. "Bonjour, Botreau," I called out. "Are you here? Can you cross the rods for me?" Vroom! The rods swung crossed. I blinked. I'd never seen the rods move so quickly and strongly, and I knew I hadn't moved them. I asked Botreau to uncross the rods, and they swung back to parallel. "Botreau, it's Sylvia. David introduced us. Do you remember me?" Again, the rods twitched strongly and swung to form an X between my fists. I was delighted with this contact with the spirit world. I wished my French wasn't so rudimentary. About all I know is bonjour and au revoir, and I was so stunned at the rod's quick response that my mind kind of went blank. I couldn't think of any further yes-no questions to ask Botreau. Obviously he was there, and obviously he remembered me. What else was there to ask, really? I bid Botreau a fond au revoir and handed the dowsing rods to the next person. The Chicago Hauntings tour also took us to Moon Point Cemetery in Streator. The cemetery predates the Civil War and was started as a family burying ground for Jacob Moon and his relatives, who were early settlers in the area. The most notable ghost at this cemetery is the Hatchet Lady, who in life guarded her son's grave after he died in the Civil War. After death, her ghost continued the vigil. The ghost carries a hatchet, of course, and will whisper or yell at visitors to get out. Other witnesses have reported a ghost boy who wanders the grounds, as well as red and white orbs. Let's go for a walk among the stones, shall we? I'm here at Moon Point Cemetery with the group Chicago Hauntings. It's a field trip. It's a history field trip to Starved Rock. This is a very pleasant little cemetery. It's been in use for a long time. Range from almost illegible to clearly cut. I saw a date here of somebody who was born in 1778 and someone who passed away in 2016. The graves are widely spread apart. There are many, many family plots here where the headstones are kind of clustered together. Ones who passed away. It's well kept. Some of the stones have flowers planted in front of them. There's not really much to set this cemetery apart. So many of the other cemeteries I've been to in the past several years, except for the fact that Moon Point Cemetery is home to a Hatchet Lady. Yes, the ghost lore of this cemetery is that one of the stories is that if you're here at night, horsing around where you shouldn't be, a lady with a hatchet will appear to chase you. And I had to drive over a train tracks, really horrible, wretched train tracks with lots of bumps and holes in the concrete and horribleness. And the addition to the lore is that if you are caught on the cemetery side of the tracks when a train comes by, you are trapped in the cemetery forever. And there's another thing that says that your car won't start until the train passes, but hey, if your car starts after the train passes, you're not really stuck there. So I'm kind of unclear on the concept of that bit of the lore. But we're going to explore this cemetery for a while. Come along and walk with me. The grass is green, but it's kind of crunchy underfoot. You can really tell that it's mid-August. I'm walking past a grave right now. Warfield, the name says on the stone. And there is a massive stand of peony plants right behind this gorgeous stone. They're not in bloom or anything, but a lovely stand of peonies. And this right here, oh, what's over here? There's a very, very old well, that's not that old. Here's one of those headstones that have the people's interests carved into the stone. Above the fellow's name, there's a tractor, and above the woman's name, there's simply an angel kneeling. And it says, married February 14th, 1940. How wonderful. And there's a real heartbreaker over here. I took a picture of this, but I'll tell you guys about it too. Over here in the Evans and Allen plot, there are 3 stones in a row that simply say, baby, April 16th, 1913. Baby, March 2nd, 1912. Baby, son of Edward E. and Lily L. Evans, died March 13th, 1911. Really makes you think. Healthcare at the beginning of the 20th century was not what it was in the beginning of the 21st century. That's for sure. Well, here's something you guys might be interested in. There's a stone here that says Allen on it, the last name. And it's the stone of Hetty Ann Allen and Jacob Mackenzie Allen. And Hetty Ann's dates are March 6, 1813 to October 20th, 1867. And Jacob This is interesting. He has a death date of January 29th, 1888, but his birth 1811. And I don't know if perhaps he himself didn't know, or his wife Hetty didn't know to pass the information down to her children. Anyway, Jacob's birth year got put onto his stone, but nothing else, just the year. Interesting stuff. Well, we might be walking around and rejoining the rest of the group and possibly doing some EVP work here, so I'll let you know when we come back.
There's a woman in like 1800s wear that's with these kids. I don't know what her deal. They're all standing behind me, right in the woods, back here.
How many kids?
Looking at us like, how many kids? 7 maybe? 7 or 8-ish?
Do you think it was a school, or is it her children, or she's a teacher maybe?
Maybe. I don't know. I don't feel that. I don't know who she is. Why, did a school burn down?
There was something that, there was some kind of building they said that
Burned.
burned.
I don't register.
No, not yours.
Because I feel like it was a fire, but I don't know. I've never been here, so I don't know. Are they buried in there?
One of the websites says that there was a fire and that it was a witch's house, and they did say
That's right, it's supposed to be a witch's house.
The cemetery?
And then some people say there was supposed to be a house back here, and
Like
that
a
was
half mile,
the witch's house.
Okay, because
And that maybe the Hatchet Lady
we
was the
saw a
witch.
farmhouse back here when we drove by it.
The firewoman, the one in with the kids. I don't know if she's a teacher though. I don't know who she was.
She was cleaning.
Did you get the sense that she was kind of felt responsible for all those kids?
Kind of, but it didn't feel like a teacher to me. Maybe
Okay.
like a mummy figure.
One of the stones we found was obviously handmade and utterly unlike any cemetery art I'd ever seen before. Rather than being cast out of concrete or carved out of stone, this marker looked as though it had been sculpted out of terracotta or some other clay, then glazed with a dark brown finish. The end result reminded me of glazed drainage tiles, like something you'd find in an old garden.
What is that?
It's a grave, but it's really weird.
It looks like a...
It looks like a tree, I know. Yeah, did you watch that?
That's... Huh.
It's interesting.
Yeah, I walked last year.
Wow.
Oh.
Wow.
Okay, that is strange.
Yeah.
What does it say on it?
Oh, hold on, I'll find out. Violette Milligan died... Hold on. Let me get a picture of this, because that's just bizarre. Okay. Excuse me, lady here, Violette Milligan. And it looks like it was made from clay.
Yeah.
And the pattern and the words scratched into it. This is wild. There we go. Died January 21st, 1896, age 50 years and 7 months, 5 days. 50 years, 7 months, 5 days. Yeah, that's not a 3, that's a 5. That's 50 years.
That's a rather old grave to have that headstone.
I've never seen
I never have either, and I've been to a lot.
anything quite like that.
I wonder if she's the witch.
She's got some sort of
Something.
significance, and there's a little M scratched on the top here. I can get a picture of that too. That's
Broke off and stuff.
That is really weird.
I've never seen a totally handmade tombstone like this. This is
Neither
just
have I.
wild.
It's like the only one out here.
Well, and this whole thing is her grave. The plants, all of this. There's stuff planted.
Yeah.
Is there stuff left for her in that?
Well, this is a gooseberry bush.
Yeah, there's some rose, like, I think they're fake roses in there, but there's definitely something.
I'm gonna use your stone for support one more time. Thank you.
Yeah, see, there's some pieces down there.
I think that's just a weedy tree there, that elm-looking thing. I'm not sure about these. But this is a gooseberry. This is probably planted on purpose. I don't know. After visiting the cemetery, we returned to Starved Rock Lodge to swap ghost stories and share chips around a campfire. I was lucky enough to be standing near Ursula's laptop as she fired up some EVP files.
This was something, but we couldn't figure out what it was.
Cemetery is named for it. Cemetery is named for it.
I don't know what it is, though. I think that last
You came here? You came here?
You came.
Did you get stuff?
Okay.
I don't know. I haven't looked at it yet. I'm just snagging yours. Did you play that I Am the Daughter again? That was awesome.
That was awesome.
That was. That's
really good. I love those when it's like an actual
Yeah.
voice and not like a whisper.
It's crazy.
How are you? Great.
That's freaking amazing.
Oh no. This is a ghost tour.
Yeah.
So we're just wrapping up for the evening.
Sharing stories around the campfire like you do.
Right. With food.
Because he just talks.
Oh yeah, that was the one where it was like
That
a whole
was from
sentence.
Ashmore, because you just talked to me, and she's like an English accent.
Because he just talks.
That was at Ashmore, Dana.
Because he just talks.
That's crazy.
When you're talking to me.
Why don't you just talk to me? Because he
Yeah.
just talks to you. Where's the one where it's like the yell? Remember the scream?
Oh,
It
yeah.
was like,
You know where we came from.
You know where we came from?
no.
Yeah. No.
You know where we came from?
Yeah, see if you can find that other one.
Which one?
The one where it's like the yelling.
Oh, that's right, yeah. Which one is...
Remember?
That one was good. Get out.
No, the thing is, you played that EVP while we were still in that room.
Yeah, I remember
And we were
that.
just like,
Did
I
you
think
hear
it's
it
this
out
one.
loud without
Yeah,
this?
it's this. No,
No,
we didn't hear anything.
Because it was pitch black in there. That's the one.
Oh my god. Was that you? That was Ashmore.
Wow.
In that room, remember?
Yeah.
So creepy.
What the heck is that noise? You couldn't figure it out, eh?
Mm.
I think it's home.
Go.
Home. I think it's home. Oh, I'm enjoying that.
Please.
What is it? I can't understand it. I think it sounds like I'm enjoying this. I'm enjoying this.
Oh, huh.
Yes.
Oh, or join us.
Or join us. Oh yeah, maybe it's that.
They're both some.
Oh, come and join us, please.
Come and join us.
Whoa.
Whoa.
Where's that from? Is that from Ashmore too?
Ashmore.
That's crazy.
Come and join us, Lane. No, I'm not. I don't want to join them. I just want to speak to them.
Hey, oh, I remember this one. Hey,
Or the lottery
you.
numbers.
Hey, you two, why are you
Lottery
here?
numbers.
This is really interesting because it sounds like it's a boy who has a speech defect. Hey, you two, why are you here?
Yeah.
It's underneath the. But it sounds like someone with like Down syndrome.
A cleft palate or something?
Yeah.
Did you look?
Hey, you two, why are you here? I'm laughing about it.
My.
I wrote that one. A sneeze.
Yeah.
But it's like a drawn out.
Yeah.
Got hay fever in the afterlife.
Yeah. Oh,
Bring
this
your
is
allergy
stuck in
medication.
here.
Sounds like
Yeah.
a dog squeak toy or something.
I'm stuck in here.
Yeah.
Oh.
Oh my.
I'm still here.
I think it's I'm stuck in here.
You
That's
got
what
cut off.
heard.
I don't know.
Yeah, stuck in here.
That first word doesn't.
Oh, this was here. Strapping me, like strapping mom. This sounds like strapping. We were trying to figure out the strapping mom bed bunk is what it sounded like. We were trying to figure out what it said. Strapping mom bed bunk.
Yeah, you're right. That's what it sounds like.
And it's got that
Bed bug.
electronic quality.
Bed bug.
Bed
Have you tried playing it backward?
This one, no. Hold on, let's see here.
Mom's got bed bug. Strapping mom's
Mom's
bed.
got that going.
That makes even less sense.
It sounds like it's backwards.
It is now.
Oh.
If you're looking for a fun day trip that stretches into an evening, I highly recommend that you explore the Chicago Hauntings website, chicagohauntings.com. Ursula's tours are reasonable, and even better, they are loads of fun. Go check them out. And don't forget that they're the folks who also do the annual Chicago Ghost Con. Join me next time when we explore the Church of the Holy Family up in northern Illinois. We'll be joining shadow hunters for this investigation. So come along with us as we go lights out.